Okay, I'm so happy to have you on, Matt. I brag about you in the opening of the monologue. Chairman of the American Conservative Union, CPAC extraordinaire, and now author of the Desecrators. I almost said the Distractors of the Desecrators, defeating the cancel culture mob and reclaiming one nation under God. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it because I know how much time.
I think your problem, Sarah, is you were trying to say the defecators, which would have been a great title because that's exactly what we think of them.
Well, this is exactly why I love Matt, everyone. I have the best time. I follow him on Twitter. I tell you this all the time. You got to follow him on Twitter. Give out your Twitter handle just so everybody can start following you because you don't know what you're missing.
@MSchlapp. @MSchlapp.
@MSchlapp. You can
MSCHLAPP.
But this is very serious, Matt. I mean, as much fun as I have following you on Twitter, and you are great, you have a great sense of humor, you are also a true patriot and a warrior in the fight against what I see as a fundamental change that is happening in our nation. And if we don't wake up, we could end up losing the very foundation that our founding fathers established that allow us to have so much liberty and freedom. And I think over the last 4 or 5 years, you and I, Mercedes, everyone, we've become really close because we've seen this leftist Marxist regime take over the Democratic Party. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, Sarah, it's one of these interesting things. I've spent my whole career in politics, and I would have given you the answer that it's good when the Democratic Party goes too far left because that allows conservatives to beat them at in the ballot box. And over time, I've realized tragically that if one of the two major parties in America turns Marxist, it's actually terrible because the history of America demonstrates that, every party gets its turn. We go back and forth, and that's just the nature of our politics. And so that means that these socialists will get power, and that's exactly what they were able to do, I'd say, through corrupt means in 2020. But all socialists come to power through corrupt means. I mean, this is the story of how Marxists get in power. And then when they get in power, unlike more traditional people, they use their power very quickly to take over everything.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because this isn't the same Democratic Party. And we hear it said over and over again of, our father's generation, our mother's generation. This is a very different Democratic Party. Why? Because I believe, as you talk about it in your book, and I'm still reading it. I just got it. I'm still reading it. But through the education system, there has been a cultural change, almost like an indoctrination, I would say ever since the 1960s. And while we were asleep, our children and some of us were being indoctrinated.
Yeah, no, this is the sad fact, which is I think we had a blasé attitude. I think my parents had a blasé attitude to, schools are liberal. Colleges are liberal. And ever since the 50s and 60s, that was just kind of well understood. And we figured that kids, get in contact with leftists throughout the education system. But as the old adage goes, then they get married, have a baby, buy a house, start paying taxes, and they become Republicans. And what we've noticed now for a couple generations is that trend didn't happen. They didn't have babies. They didn't get married necessarily. They didn't have a job where they actually ended up paying any income taxes because of the kind of the progressive way our income taxes are administered. So you actually didn't have all these impacts. They didn't feel the tax bite. They weren't worried about having 3-4 kids and how they were going to pay for it. So then what you had is a lot of a growth towards single people who were living in big cities, which they liked, and they didn't really buy into this idea of the trends that normally turn somebody into a more conservative thinker. And of course, the most overriding part of that is the war on religion and the secularization of our society, where if you don't go to church on a regular basis and you don't get married, the likelihood that you're going to stay very left-wing is very high. And those are all the trends we've seen in society. And then if you overlay that with this idea that everything from the media told you that being single is so great, it's so sexy, it's so cool. It's interesting because the people I know who are single are probably the most, sad about the fact that they didn't find a life partner. So it's the opposite of what Hollywood and everyone spins. And these cities are hellholes. Donald Trump was right when he used the bad SH word, holes. They are literally falling apart. It's not cool to be in one of our major cities right now. As a matter of fact, it's very dangerous.
And it's Democrat. Most of those cities, and in fact, all of them are run by Democrats. And you're absolutely right. I think there is this idea that Hollywood has spread through the media and through multimedia, which is really interesting because as we see now, Twitter and Facebook and all of the social media sites, which were supposed to be a forum for ideas and being able to speak freely, have now become part of the censorship, right? They've controlled the narrative. And these are the people on the left. So a lot of our children are really facing this kind of challenge where they're being told going to church is ridiculous. You need to be a radical. You can be any gender you want to be. You can be any animal you want to be. It's like it's become an upside down world where I'm telling you this. I'm going to ask you how you feel about this. I won't say who, but there is a child that I know who was telling their parents about someone in their classroom, and this is like in the 3rd grade, who was saying, it was a little girl who was saying that she's a boy and that she can be anything she wants to be and that it would be okay for the other children to be anything they want to be. I think, and her mother is very supportive of this. I think that becomes very confusing for children. And I think our children are facing a very dangerous time in our history where, they don't even know who they are. And the media is trying to direct them and turn them, I believe, against their own parents and against maybe the established morals or guidance that their parents are trying to give them. There's like a conflict there. It's almost like they're trying to take kids away from their parents, put things in their heads.
That's right. In the forward to the book or the letter I write in the book, I thank our pastor, Father Hathaway, the Desecrators. That's right. And, he's been a great a pastor to us, a religious mentor. And one of the things he said in one of his homilies, which I thought was great, is he said, in America today, or in, civilization today, we tolerate everything, but we forgive nothing. We've learned all the wrong lessons from the Bible, which is we actually shouldn't tolerate sin and we shouldn't tolerate dysfunction, but we should be compassionate with those who are struggling with that, as we all are. I know I am. Just follow me on Twitter and you will wonder if I suffer mental problems, because some days reading the news media, I'm in terrible mental anguish. But seriously, even just with the condition of making mistakes in our life, I mean, we all are dealing with this. It's called the human condition. And what the modern society has done is scrambled it all up by saying, no, you have to tolerate everything and almost act like any iteration that a decision makes is good because, as Oprah Winfrey would say, it's my truth. Well, there's no such thing as Sarah Carter's truth and Matt Schlapp's truth. There's truth. Then there is the conscience, which, you never hear this word conscience anymore. But God gives us a conscience where we're supposed to use what they used to teach me, our right reason, our reason properly informed with morality to then make decisions. And when we feel bad about a decision, sometimes that's not because we're having compassion towards another human being. Sometimes we feel bad about a decision because we know it's the wrong decision. We know it's not the decision that God wants us to make. These are foreign concepts in a world that says a little girl can decide to be a cat, a little girl can decide to be a boy. And instead of giving them compassionate help as they suffer through questions about gender, really what we ought to be doing is helping them understand that when you're a kid, you have lots of ideas and thoughts. And probably a lot of them should never be manifest in their life. It's just part of growing up.
Yeah, it's just a state. and your parents guide you and they guide you through it. We've seen that, though, in the education system. We saw it in Loudoun County. I know you're very well aware of, and we're very active in what was happening in Virginia, with the election of Governor Youngkin. I thought that was a phenomenal sign of hope, in my opinion, that things were going to shift in the right direction. Are you encouraged, Matt, about parents standing up to, in the school board, up to the school boards and to the former governor of Virginia and saying, you know what? No more. And right now we're seeing those truckers just, hundreds, thousands of people in the streets in Ottawa saying, you know what? No more. We see it in Europe right now, where people are walking into the streets. In Great Britain with the mandates, where the government's finally thrown their hands up in the air and said, you know what? No more. Is that an encouraging sign for us, or are we still in a very dangerous place?
I think of an image in my head when we think about one person doing something courageous. And oftentimes when you do something courageous, it destroys your life. We call them martyrs in the Christian faith. And I think about I think it was a young man who stood in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square when I was a much younger person. I'm sure that person was immediately sent to a gulag, and I'm sure the life was snuffed from him. But it captured the whole world. We've been taught to believe that China was this place that was evolving, and we didn't want to be judgmental. We wanted to be tolerant to their cultural path, and eventually the free market would drive China to being a member of the G7, and that picture and others helped us understand that was a false reality. That was a lot of propaganda that was being pushed. And so when I see these moms and dads stand up, or cops that don't believe that cops are racist and they don't want to be indoctrinated by BLM violent ideology, when I see teachers say that parents have the right to see what kids are being taught and what books are in the library and what books they're checking out. Think about this. In Virginia, you could go start taking chemicals to change your gender without telling your parents, and that's happening in other major cities.
California too.
So
California
I think
and a lot of other states.
A lot of it's going on in California. That's right. In these big, broken, blue, brittle states and cities. It's the reason why we wrote the book is that we're sitting in that study in my house, which you and Marty have both been to. Mm-hmm. And I've just been accused as the chairman of CPAC of starting an international super spreader of corona, when we had one documented case who came to CPAC that year and one case that left. I've since learned we had 2 cases that came and 2 cases that left. We did not have a super spreader. APAC was a few days away from CPAC. They had all the Democratic presidential candidates there. They had like a dozen cases. They got no scrutiny over any kind of super spreader. It was all about Trump. It was all about conservatives. I couldn't believe it was happening. And then I receded to my house, as I guess we all had to do as the world shut down. And then we had the George Floyd tragedy. Then we had BLM and race riots that took place all over the country, which then led into this idea that we'd have abnormalized voting, and we threw all the rules for voting out the windows because verification or IDs became racist too, and the socialists were able to come to power, as I say, corruptly. All of that happened in a short span, and at each one of those, I remember feeling in my soul just so much pain and anguish over each one. I couldn't believe it was happening, and you and I would try to go on TV and say these things, and it was hard. And, you were edited from being on guest lists because some of these things that needed to be said, it was uncomfortable for corporate media to hear. And so I just felt like I was losing my voice. I was losing my ability to talk about things. And what I realized is there's a spiritual element to all of these fights we're having in America. And I'm going to be probably arrogant to say, I felt like what God was telling me through all of this kind of persecution of Americans who love America is it was my job, and my wife felt the same thing, it was her job, because we were losing so much, we lost a business, we lost so many things, that we just decided that we would be twice as bold, also making sure that we weren't just being obnoxious and, peddling false information, but be twice as bold in standing up for these values. And that's why this book is here. That is what's going on in America. There is a spiritual battle that's going on in this country that is manifesting itself in corporate boardrooms, professional sports, every single election, everything you see on television. And there's more of us than there are of them, Sarah, which is why they had to cheat in the election. You never cheat when you're going to win.
Right. So do you feel
a psychopath?
Well, do you feel like, because let's talk about election integrity really quick, Matt, this was, nobody could even now hardly say a thing. It's like we can't talk about mandates and the vaccine. And now we're finding out that ivermectin, at least in Japan right now, has a huge study that says, guess what? It actually is working against Omicron. But nobody could talk about it. We couldn't talk about the election or question the election without being censored and literally removed. We see Joe Rogan now. Joe Rogan is up against, a huge battle, even with Spotify. He's up against a battle, and you were up against a huge battle. I mean, just for telling the truth, just for coming out. I mean, I felt this way. I know you felt this way. I was devastated when I heard what was going on with you. And then I felt the same way. I'm like, you know what? We all are given a task, right? And a challenge. And just like you and Mercedes stood up and said, you know what? No more. We're going to take this on as a challenge. You did that, and you gave strength to other people. And they said, wait a minute, I'm going to stand up now. But I think there's a part of me that is, we have 2022 midterms, coming this November. We've got the 2024 election. Super excited about CPAC. But I'm very worried about what the establishment, as well as the very leftist Marxists, might do to try to thwart what the American people actually want.
So basically, through what we're seeing now with all these videos that have come out in Pennsylvania, there's a group of people up there that talk about patriots and brave. The whistleblower in Pennsylvania who helped take these videos has to be in hiding because the state takes all these aggressive actions against any of us when we try to shine a spotlight on the truth. And you're right. This whole question about the virus then turned into this whole question about Fauci deciding how you would treat the virus. Fauci's been wrong about every aspect of what he's advised us to do. Yet if you are a voice on TV or radio trying to highlight that, the chances are you've been throttled back. And we've all experienced this. And so, but it does begin at the ballot box. And I'd say as Mercy and I are traveling around the country, it's the number one question. It's the number one thing on the mind of every Republican or conservative or libertarian or MAGA voter, which is, the presidential campaign last time didn't do its job. The RNC didn't do its job. They didn't have a plan to take care of all of the illegal voting. And do you have a plan this time? And look, I look at Liz Cheney's race in Wyoming. It's an open primary. Democrats can vote in it. I wish I lived there.
I wish I lived there. I wish I lived there. I'd run.
You might need to run. Although we do have a good candidate out there in Harry Hageman.
You do.
And so I look at that and I say, okay, I saw this invitation for a fundraiser for Liz Cheney, and it was every kind of former friend of ours, and maybe some people who are still friends. I don't know. Mercy and I are helping her opponent, but it just tells you all the establishment, all the power is for Liz Cheney, even though she's doing everything in her power to create a whole generation of Scooter Libbies. She's trying to use congressional power illegitimately put forward because there's no minority to smear a bunch of Trump supporters and people who wanted to support voter ID. It's the very crime that she and her family accused Democrats of when that was pointed at Scooter Libby. It took Donald Trump to pardon Scooter Libby. And the question is, who's going to pardon the dozens of victims from this committee? Because we're going to have those victims. And I'm going to fight that. We cannot allow the Democrats to continue to destroy the reputations of people simply for being a Republican.
What do you think about this? The whole and just let me. You can answer it. You don't have to answer it. It's a very controversial subject right now. But this whole idea with the January 6th committee and And then some of the people that are being held in, in prison, in solitary, being charged. I mean, there's people out there that say some of these folks are political prisoners. There's others that say, no, just leave them in there. They attacked the Capitol. I mean, what do you think's going on here? I mean, I know President Trump stood up and he was like, look, some of these people I am going to pardon. And he made it very clear. And that just caused a whole wave of controversy as well.
Look, my view when 1/6 occurred, I didn't go to the rally. I didn't go to the Capitol. I just felt like I had fought so hard to expose the election wrongdoing. And it just seemed like no matter how much evidence we had, no matter how many times we explained it, that the truth wasn't going to come out until later. Now we found out that there was $500 million of Zuckerbucks and other billionaires' money that went to corruptly set up boxes outside the law to allow people to ballot harvest, or as Dinesh D'Souza is saying, these mules that just brought in a bunch of illegal paper ballots and just jammed them in the boxes. Videos are coming to light left and right now. I've had videos sent to me. I mean, this is just the truth. In the end, it will come out. It just takes a while for it to come out. And people say, well, how much of this illegal vote was there? And the correct answer is you really can't know. You can't know until there's a real investigation of what took place. And the problem is they so corruptly covered their tracks by separating envelopes from ballots and because we have anonymous voting in this country, thank God. And, so there's really no way to put some of this back together. And the left knew that. Mark Elias knew it. It's why they engineered it with all of these billionaires' dollars. By the way, we gave those billionaires all of their money by being their customers. And they used it to have a coup in this country. And it's really, it's shameful. And I would simply say coming to this election, we've got to be awfully careful to make sure that we have plans in place. And that's why 1/6 happened. And for all the people around the Capitol that day, I would simply say this. Anybody who tried to physically destroy the Capitol, it's a crime, and they ought to be punished for their crime. Anybody who ran at a cop and was physical with a cop, they should be punished for that. I think that's a terrible crime. I agree with what Tucker Carlson has said. That's called a riot, and riots are unfortunate, and there are a lot of crimes that committed in riots, and people should be held to account. But my God, Black Lives Matter spent 18 months burning down our cities, killing cops, advocating for physical violence against cops, taking over whole cities, Chaz and Chop, making it so that it wasn't safe to go to your
setting
office.
Setting fire.
I was there with Laura Ingraham the night we went undercover into the Black Lives Matter riots in Washington, D.C., when they almost pierced the perimeter around the White House. Trump had to be brought to the bunker, and they set the president's church on fire. Not Trump's church, every American's president's church on fire. And they were defacing all the monuments and all the federal buildings. I watched this with my own eyes. And our current vice president helped bail them out. All those people got out the next day. This is outrageous. And to act like it's okay to put people in solitary confinement for a year for rioting, even if they committed crimes, which I'm not going to absolve. But what about the other side? Every time they riot, murder, burn down, these people on 1/6 didn't murder people. The Black Lives Matter rioters murdered people. The people were the security guards, the Secret Service, and local cops around the White House. There were dozens of injured officers. Why is there no accountability? Why isn't it similar?
Exactly. It was almost like there's two sets of laws. There's two sets of rules. There's two sets of justice. And then the media, the mainstream media, supports one side. So that's it. There you go. You don't even have a voice. Especially for people that were trying to get someone to listen, trying to have some type of justice, even during those riots. And now BLM is obviously being investigated. Black Lives Matter. A lot of the money that they took now appears to have been washed into other investments for Black Lives Matter leaders, like big mansions and cars and other things. So, yeah, you hope that CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, anybody, please just tell the truth. Just lay it out straight. Like, Matt, I agree with you, Matt. If you break something, if you destroyed something, you have to pay the price for it. But you don't have to pay the price like it was a like you were going to overthrow the entire United States of America. It was a riot, just like everything else. Last question. And this is the big one. I know I've kept you on much longer than you thought you were going to be on. But CPAC, I'm very excited. Oh, thank you. I'm very excited about CPAC. We obviously know 45 is going to be there. There's going to be Governor Ron DeSantis. I am going to be there. I'm very excited. So many, I would say, voices on the, I don't want to just say the right, just so many patriots, so many, voices for freedom and liberty. I'm just very excited about this CPAC. Tell us a little bit about it. What should we expect?
Well, let me just say, I now call us Americans who love America, because that's what
I love
we are.
It. Americans
we love
who
our
love
country,
America.
And we won't be told it's racist, and we won't be told
we are not desecrators. We are not the desecrators.
That's right. We're the opposite. And so, yeah, we're very excited about CPAC, because CPAC has got a great history and it's always been a great conference, but I think we've been able to evolve it into a real movement. It's a movement for freedom overseas, and you know that personally, Sarah. And it's a movement for which has become, I think, in some ways, the most important political element for those of us who love our country, who are Americans, who love its founding, who love its founders, who love its founding documents, because we're not just Republicans at CPAC. We're not just conservatives at CPAC. We're not just libertarians at CPAC. It's everything you can imagine. America First, MAGA, independent, lots of conservative Democrats, lots of people that represent different elements of society. I think really everybody feels like they can play a role in what we now call the coalition. We used to call ourselves the American Conservative Union, which puts on CPAC. Now we're calling ourselves the Conservative Political Action Coalition. I want to help lead a coalition. I don't want to lead a niche group of people that all have to think the same. I want to help lead a coalition of people from across America who have some differences of opinion, but who will defend this country and not allow our kids' minds to be polluted with this Marxism. Anybody who's an anti-Marxist is a part of this coalition.
I totally agree. Wow, that's so great, because I always say that we don't want to be just a little group. We're not saying we're just this. We're just Republicans. We're just conservatives. We are like, there's so many of us out there, independents, like you said, and people who really want to preserve America and preserve what our founding fathers gave us in such a brilliant documentation, the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of Independence. Thank you so much, Matt. This is the Desecrators, guys. You can get it. Sometimes we call them the what? The defecators?
That's the defecators.
Sometimes, but this is a brilliant book. I'm so excited. I'm taking it with me to New York today. I'm going to be reading it on the plane. You can imagine the scandal that I am going to cause, but I am going to do a picture for Instagram on the plane with the Desecrators, and I'm going to be flying with a bunch of liberals to New York, I'm sure. So mask and
Sarah,
all.
do me one favor, just
What?
for the photo, act like you're eating peanuts and take your mask off, okay?
Yeah. I so will do that. You will see the shock and awe. I will make those leftist Marxists cringe and scream. They will hate me. You know that.
That's
I just
awesome.
want to get thrown off the plane, right? I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to keep one French fry in my mouth like that guy.
I love
Eat
that
it the
guy.
whole hour. Eat it the whole hour. You're the best, Matt. Thank you so much. Where can people go to get your book? Amazon.com, I'm sure. And where else?
But yeah, they can go to Amazon. They can go to Barnes & Noble. They can go to Books A Million. They can go right to the publisher, which is Tan Books. Just go wherever you want. I mean, I'm not a big Amazon user, but quite honestly, that's an important place to show up on the bestseller list, as you know, Sarah. And right now we're in pre-sales.
Absolutely.
So as many of these pre-sales occur, that means we'll get books in the hands of people through bookstores and such. So I just appreciate everybody. I actually want this book to get out there. I think it tells an important story about this fight in our country.
Oh, it is. And this is a fight that is far from over. It is one we need to do for our children and for our grandchildren and for the future of this great nation. Because like you said, Matt, the rest of the world is looking to us. We are the experiment. We are this beautiful beacon of light, and we want to keep it that way. So people in Japan, people in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and as the Chinese start rearing their, extending their tentacles across the globe, and the Russians, we still need to be there. We still need to preserve this. Thank you so much, Matt, for being a part of the show. I can't wait for you to come back on.
Thank you, Sarah, and God bless.
God bless.